says to change
Waiting.
or not say.
Wait, it says waiting for...
Starting Stream Hub. Yes. Excellent.
Oh, neat.
So now, I think we might be
Okay.
live.
Yeah, we are live now.
Yay! Hi, guys! YouTube. It's kind of crazy for streaming. So, I know there were people waiting for this. If you're listening, I hope you're still there and can post to us your questions. So, Garth is going to say hi. So, and I wonder how I can see those other questions. They were just waiting because I don't actually know what their questions are.
Oh, okay.
I
Maybe
know
they
I
have to be
had
signed in.
somebody on Facebook. So there was a question I got from, and I might be able to look that up, Garth, but I'm going to go look up my question that somebody sent me on Facebook.
Sure.
And I'll see if there's a way I can find those people and reach out to people on social media. So while I'm doing that, you probably know what people ask you. So this is Garth if you haven't met him already.
Hey, everyone.
And yeah, Garth is the main guy at Port Prep for animation and illustration. And so, and you're a grad from Sheridan.
Yeah.
So maybe you can tell us a little bit about you, and you must know what people are always asking you.
Sure.
Like, so tell them about that. I'm going to try to connect up with you guys. And so if you're listening, please put something in the chat. What questions would you want to ask about getting accepted into Sheridan Animation or any other animation program you're dreaming of? Garth and I help students get accepted and just learn the fundamentals, right? So, yeah, go ahead. So, let's see. Do we have any questions?
Not yet, but someone is here, at least.
Oh,
So, what was the first question? It was my story.
just a little bit so they know who you are.
Yeah, so I guess I do a whole bunch of things right now, but my general story is that I went to Sheridan College, I studied animation, and lived with many people that studied illustration, so I kind of have a little bit of both worlds. And now I do actually a big mix of both. Mostly I do full-time contract animation, so I have my own business doing that. So I work independently at home, which is really great. And I also do illustration for books, board games, graphic novels, and most recently I also do like fine art painting, which is what is behind Karen right now. Yeah, that's a bit about me. And in terms of what people want to know for their portfolio, oh yeah, we've got two here. That's great.
Oh, where are they? And what are they saying anything?
Do you have any tips for life drawing? Great. All right, we have our first question. So, if you have any tips for life drawing. So, life drawing is, there's only tips for life drawing. I feel like there's just endless amount of things that I could say. But specifically, if you're applying to something like animation, you want to make sure that your drawings are very quick and expressive. And by expressive, I mean like fairly loose, but with enough sort of knowledge and application of anatomy that you can still identify and see what's happening in the pose. But yeah, you want to, like, if you can get poses that look like they're either in motion or that show action and story. Story is sort of the big thing that should sort of overlay every single piece of the portfolio that you do for your Sheridan portfolio. So whether it's even doing a perspective drawing of a street or a room or whatever, there should be some kind of underlying story. And even if that's a very small, like, situation-based story, like in a pose, for example, it could be that the model looks like they're at a baseball game or something like that. And there's a whole bunch of different poses you could get from that. So if you have an opportunity to even direct your model that you're drawing from, then you could suggest a whole bunch of different stories that they could probably think of a whole bunch of different poses for. So I find that really helps, as if your model's like actually doing poses that are more specific towards a story, a narrative of some kind for animation. And yeah, it helps to be able to show a little bit of that, even in a gesture, even if there's like and sometimes You may even have props. That would be really nice to kind of put in there, but definitely not necessary and not expected either. But generally, the things they want to see in a life drawing for a portfolio are knowledge of anatomy, simple anatomy though, not like super advanced musculature or anything, just like the basic rib cage and hips and how they kind of move together. And so if you can get dynamic poses, that's really great. And by that I mean like twisting poses, even if the model like turns their head a little bit, has different, if their limbs are doing different things. Like the worst thing you could get is someone that's just kind of standing or has both of their arms up in a kind of like parallel fashion, because it's not very interesting. So the more dynamic, the better. If they can do a different angle, if it, like their shoulders could be at an opposing angle to their hips. So say their shoulders are up like this, and then their hips are kind of doing the opposite. That's called a contrapposto pose. That's kind of a very classical idea of how to basically get a really nice pose to draw. And where you are matters too. Like you could make your angle even more dynamic by situating yourself like a little bit above or a little bit below, so you're getting like a different angled shot. That would be really interesting. But really it's mostly about just the structure and the anatomy, the believability of the pose. So does it look like it's 3D or does it look like it's a drawing? And that's really tricky and can take a long time to develop. But basically for me, I think of my checklist when I'm doing a quick gesture, and that is like start with the line of action, so the general motion of the pose, and then I usually will try to get either the angle of the shoulders or the angle of the hips in, very simply with like just a little line, just to kind of help me so that I can build the pose from there afterwards. And then I'll usually draw the rib cage, connect it with the midline or a spine, and place the feet. I actually, to be honest, I usually place the feet sooner, because once you have the feet placed, then you can build everything on top of that. And sometimes you'll draw the whole pose, and then when you start to place the feet, you realize that the pose doesn't work, and so I find sometimes starting from the bottom up helps. Usually, like when people first start drawing, they often start drawing from the head, which is often a bad idea because it makes you draw heads too small, versus kind of building it up more structurally with very light, soft lines. So if I had a piece of newsprint, I'd be turning my conte to the side, and not pressing too hard as I'm building up the pose, as I'm doing the rib cage, the hips, the shoulder angle, the hip angle, and a bit of a midline or spine. As I'm building those pieces up, I'm doing it very, very softly, so that then when I'm finally actually connecting the general axis points of the arms or legs, I can do that with a darker line. So, I mean, there's so much to talk about with life drawing. I could teach a whole 3-hour class on it. So, we might have another question.
What do we got? Esther, thanks for joining us again. Thanks for finding us, because I know you guys were asking. We finally figured it out. YouTube makes this too difficult.
Yeah.
So sorry.
Should be easier.
So let's see. What does Esther want to know? I see a lot of people that score generally very high on their portfolio, but get low marks on storyboards. What is usually missing from their boards, and how can I make sure that doesn't happen to me?
That's a really great question.
That even happened to Michelle.
Who's that?
Remember Michelle in the US? She got in.
Okay.
But her storyboard. Oh, do you? Her storyboard mark was lower, but she got super high. She got a 94%.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. That's definitely gonna get
but
you in.
Her storyboard was lower than last year.
Okay. Shoot.
Yeah,
so storyboarding is probably the most difficult thing, because it involves every other aspect that's in the whole portfolio. So you have some life drawing because you're drawing characters. You have some character design because those characters are cartoons. You have perspective because they're going to be in some kind of environment. So storyboarding, the reason I think people score the lowest is because there's the most amount of things to mess up. And it's putting everything together into one. So even if the poses, your character poses look good, sometimes the environment will not, and then you have a disparity between the drawing of the background and the characters. So there's a lot going on, and also like it uses knowledge of filmmaking, basically. That's what you're doing with a storyboard. It's like using actual shots, like mid shot, close up, long shot, over the shoulder shot. Like you can, there's so many different shots that you could choose, and they want to see a variety. What a lot of people do is they'll do the same kind of medium, usually a medium shot, so from like the waist up, and they'll do that for every single of the 4 frames, or all long shots where you see the whole character, and neither of those options are good. I mean, you can do some of those, but not only those kind of shots. They want to see that you know about filmmaking a little bit. So if you can even get some of that knowledge, that's a really great idea. There's actually a lot of great YouTube channels. This wasn't a thing when I was studying, but there's so many YouTube channels that talk about filmmaking and blocking and composition in shots. If you just even watch like a whole bunch of those, like Every Frame of Painting and Nerdwriter, and there's a whole bunch more now. Dan Fox has a great one on blocking and composition. If you just start to watch some of those, you start to see a little bit of what they're looking for in your shots. So the more filmmaking knowledge you have, the better. But also, like, you need to use your good drawing on top of that. So it's demanding a lot. It's a really difficult thing. So I think it totally makes sense that most people do bad. But also, like, if you just learn about filmmaking, make sure your drawing is good. It really helps to have like a mentor of some kind, whether that's us or someone else or something that can look at it, have a second eye on it, and be like, oh, you're breaking this filmmaking rule, or you're not. This shot isn't harmonic with the next shot. The cut does too much and it's jarring to the viewer. Things like that. It's hard to know about that, especially coming out of high school where you don't really talk about that at all. So those are some of my advice for that. Let's see, we've got more questions here.
Yeah.
Are you guys going to post this live video on YouTube after it's done? Yes, I think so.
Assuming it's recording.
Yeah.
We're live streaming, not on this, or we are on this?
This is the live one. This is what they're seeing. So it's slightly delayed. But you should
start the recording then, because you're not recording it.
No, it's streaming.
I know.
It'll be good. It'll be on
record?
YouTube. Yeah.
Good.
As long as YouTube is getting it, then we're good to go. So let's see what the next one is. What is no problem ever asked her? I hope that helped a little bit. Cupcake is asking, what does Sheridan look for in the character rotations? I'm gonna turn that a little bit and talk about like what are some of the common mistakes that people make in character rotations. Because that's sort of what you're asking, because they say very clearly what they're at. They want to see a rotated character from different views, basically. But what a lot of people do is that they don't realize that it needs to be, although it's a 2-dimensional cartoon character, it needs to feel as though it's in 3D space. So it's on some kind of platform, some kind of 3-dimensional platform that isn't just you're not using, like, you have to use perspective, basically. So the feet are going to be in perspective. Everything's going to be going kind of back towards you don't need to draw horizon lines or anything. This isn't that kind of exercise. But they need to look like they're standing on something. So even placing the feet in the right way. Another thing that I find is a lot of people, when they see a rotation, the rotation basically looks like this. The character's kind of just like standing there like this, and then you see that, and then you see this, and then that, and it's like no one stands like that. Like you should have poses that feel a little bit naturalistic, even if your character is very rigid character, like a mad scientist or something, that they might have their shoulders bent up and doing something, but they need to, everything about the pose, even in a rotation, needs to communicate the personality of that character. That's why we spend so much time in our summer camp talking about, we spend like a whole half lesson just on developing your personality, so that you're not starting to draw with a complete blank slate and you're kind of just saying, what do I like to draw? Because when you sketch just from your visual library that's in your mind, you don't have a story necessarily in mind. Or maybe you do. That's great. But I doubt you've gone in to think about who your character is that deeply. And sometimes I find some of the greatest designs come from characters that are very fully fleshed out. So the more you know your character, the better you should be able to draw them, is sort of how I work.
So how would they stand?
One thing is, like, a lot of people draw like a straight arm like this. And if you just like stand normally, your arm is slightly bent. And even your hand, like a lot of people will draw like this kind of hand where your hand is completely flat. If you just relax your hand, it basically curls a little bit. So there's like this certain, it's just a natural kind of stance. So the best resource you have is yourself, and just like see how you hopefully you're not standing extremely rigid. I hope you're not that kind of person, because you're going to have probably some kind of back problems later in your life. I think we have a bunch more.
Okay, what else we got? What would you recommend for getting better at perspective drawing and layout? So, what would you answer? Because you're the editor.
Yeah.
I teach the
That's
perspective drawing.
Maybe Karen's gonna take it. So for the
but
portfolio,
from your point of view as an animator, what would you say when you see student drawings? And then maybe I can add to that.
Yeah, sure. So, how is that phrase? So, what would you recommend for getting better at perspective? My answer to that is sort of how I would recommend to get better at basically anything, which is to copy people that have done it very well. So for painting, you do like a master study of a master painting and learn from that. And I think like the great thing about perspective is that it's literally everywhere. So you could take a picture of a streetscape or inside of a building or some kind of place where perspective is going to be used, and try to figure out how that works and why it works, and basically dissect it and figure out where the vanishing lines are. You can do it from life too, although that's more difficult for sure. There's like more thrown at you. So if you copy an existing work, that's really great, or a photograph or something from a film, then it's taking one more piece of difficulty out of the equation, which in my opinion is better versus drawing from life. But obviously you want to eventually be able to draw from life. So and draw a variety of things. Like a lot of people, when they are first starting to learn perspective, they're just drawing boxes, but almost nothing in reality is a box. Like everything is a different shape. Even cars these days especially are far less boxy than they used to be, and they're all rounded. And so if you even just try drawing those things, even freehand, you'll learn a lot about how perspective works. But yeah, it's also, if you're just getting started, you do need to pull out your rulers and get the horizon lines in and vanishing points and everything, and dissect things a little bit more deeply. But you can also just like, I'm a big fan of just like doing it from any resources that you can gather. So photos, video, I think that's a great way to go.
So, if you're new to perspective, a great thing to do, which Garch just mentioned, and I often help beginner students this way, will either look through a window and draw with a dry erase marker right on the window. What do I see through my window? Because that's basically what's happening in perspective. We're taking the 3D information and converting it to a 2D flat plane. So if you want to look more live, you can draw with a white border marker on your window the street scene you see outside of your house. And then you can find where the vanishing points are. Now, in this room, we can't see much perspective right now. But I like to take a photo, print it out, and then I'm going to trace over, maybe with a colored pencil, all the vanishing lines. And I'm going to see where they cross in the middle of the page. Say it's a 1-point perspective where, like in the room right now, this wall behind us is parallel to our chest and back. So we would be in a 1-point situation right now.
That's actually a great point, if I could add to that.
Yeah.
Just that when you first start drawing perspective, usually I find I always started drawing like really boring angles without really realizing it. I was just like, so to start to identify like what is it that makes a perspective drawing interesting, like because you can put the camera anywhere. You can put as an artist, you can put your vantage point wherever you want. So you should try to maximize interest however you can, I would say.
Like 1-point perspective is easier as a beginner, but it often is boring.
Yeah. Right?
Because like the back wall to be parallel to the view is kind of boring. It's not very dynamic unless there's some really interesting stuff in the foreground. So 2-point perspectives or 3-point where you have a higher angle or a lower angle where there's a bit of tilt to the walls, like the vertical lines tilt. That makes it a little more dynamic. Or just you can still look out straight ahead so that verticals are vertical, but you can have a higher level or a lower level. That creates more drama too. So that's one thing. A camera angle is one thing that makes a great looking drawing, but to just understand perspective, it's good to find a really good perspective book or some good tutorial videos that with correct information, because there's a lot of bad information about perspective on the internet too. So just be careful what you find. But what I find helps is to start by print out a photo, trace over all the converging lines, see where they cross, find the vanishing points, find the horizon line, which will always be horizontal, and then study the perspective. It really helps to take a course though. So find, like, I don't know if some of you are in Toronto School of Art has some good perspective drawing courses. We teach it at our summer camp. But that's what I hear from a lot of students, that it helps to take a course because it's a little bit technical. There's some great online courses. Have you found a really good one that you like?
Yeah, I mean, there's services like Schoolism would be a great one.
Schoolism, great.
CGMA, what is it called? Any one of the there's Watts Atelier, and then there's Art Masters Academy or something like that. It has a great one. There's so many good ones now. Like, there's no shortage, that's for sure.
Yeah, so definitely take a course. And then when it comes to figure drawing, study anatomy. Get to know your anatomy and what's called landmarks. So let's see, there's more questions. Let's move on.
So one person is asking, we have a whole bunch actually. So how hard or simple should the poses be for character rotation? I'm going to try to answer that quickly. So it's really up to you. You don't want to get super fancy with it if it's not going to do anything for the personality. But if you do have a character that has a really wacky personality or has some kind of, pose them in a way that communicates what their personality is. So if you have a big, like, cave troll looking thing, don't just draw him as if he's, like, pleasant and, like, about to go for a job interview or something. You want to draw him in his, like, nasty kind of ogre-like looking stance, right? You want to accentuate their personality. So, and people always think you need to have a symmetrical, like, T-pose or something like you see for 3D models, but you don't. You can have one hand on a hip. You can be asymmetrical pose. They can be holding a prop like a cane or a gun or whatever. If that adds to their personality, you can do a lot more than you think. It doesn't have to be a very technical, boring exercise. All right, next one. Do you have any other school recommendations other than Sheridan College? Yeah, I mean, there's Seneca College isn't far away. Vancouver Film School is really great, but very expensive and been very compressed, and those people do great. It's more of a technical college. I think it's a little less focused on art. Often people do that as like a post grad, but animation schools. So there's not too many animation schools. There's Max the Mutt. There's online courses you could take. I'm really going to put emphasis on, like, online courses for this kind of thing. That's most of it.
What do you think of, I mean, there are other smaller programs.
Yeah, like there's Conestoga has a new animation program, but they're just getting started.
There's some other
Sheridan's
small
the most established
too.
But, yeah.
I mean, if you find that, because it can take quite a while to get prepared for a school like Sheridan. And sometimes it can take years to build all your skills. So what's the best way to do that? One way might be to go to a second or third tier school just to be learning it. Another way is to just really learn how to draw really well.
Yeah.
Through private classes or illustration or art fundamentals.
That's what I would
lessons
vote
with
for.
a mentor.
Is like, just if you can't. I mean, Sheridan, I'm pretty sure is like inarguably the best school for animation in Canada. Vancouver Film School is good but different. It's like it maybe is better. I don't know. I don't know it that well. I've heard goods and bads about it, so I'm not even sure what to say. But some of the stuff I've seen come out of it is really great. But really, like, online training, you could do so much, and you don't even have to go. You save a lot of money, and that's a huge thing. So it's hard to, like, justify going somewhere other than for the fact of meeting students and getting to, that kind of thing. Okay, so I want to touch on this because I have so much to say about this. So advice for personal artwork for the portfolio. There's so much. The personal artwork is a really great opportunity for you to demonstrate your own personality, because everything else is the cookie cutter kind of what they get from everyone. But the personal artwork is so important because that's when you get to show what you're actually interested in. You could put a comic. Comics are great because they're sort of like storyboarding, and they also demonstrate lots of drawing. You could throw more characters in there, or maybe a prop, like I don't know, a wagon. Don't everyone do a wagon if I suggest things in this video. Just like something like that, where you're taking something that's like just a simple wagon or a car, and then you infuse that thing with personality and character. And then that's an amazing, like you could do, maybe not a rotation, but like the car or whatever from different views. A lot of people don't do that because everyone loves drawing characters, and so everyone puts emphasis on that. So if you can make your own different and a little bit more unique, then that's a great thing to do. So even a prop like a magic wand, a cane, something like that would be really neat to see. And your process, it's a great opportunity to show your process. So all the sketches that it took to get there. If you're interested in background design or composition, show a whole bunch of little thumbnails of different compositions, and then taking those thumbnails and making them a little bit more established, like more like a sketch, I guess, and then developing that further into a background and then further into a painting. Showing that whole process is amazing. Like they love seeing that process because that's exactly how it would work at an animation studio. So if you look at any of the kind of behind the scenes artwork for different animation studios, whether that's games or feature film or TV, you'll get a good indication of like what they're looking for. Those art of books, like art of Zootopia or whatever, they always have tons of great ideas for what you could do. Don't always just do characters, because again, everyone wants to be a character designer. It's like it's the hottest job sort of in the animation studio, but there's so few of that role. Whereas if you can show a storyboard, or better yet, take that storyboard, edit it together into a simple editing software, and actually produce a video from it, and you can show a little animation reel, which is really great. Like that's kind of going above and beyond. So you want to think like that. Anything that lets you stand out, that you know it is not going to be done by the average person, because there's so many like, you know, self-portraits or simple like drawing of a mug, or you know, something like that, where it's like they want to see your personality. Like just get your personality into that. Show like whatever you like consuming in terms of media, like children's books or whatever. Do that. Like do a simple little children's book. You don't have to show every single illustration. Just a few illustrations from a book or something like that would be great, because that all sort of relates back to animation.
Yeah, I think that it's important to show a variety of your skills, and always in the service of story. So if you want to show that you do understand forms, even though they took out the still life object drawing thing, it's still good to show that you know that. But you know, don't just show us the mug, maybe some props from a story that you've got, or vehicles like Garth was saying, always with story and personality.
I heard from a student who took the character design summer course at Sheridan that the scores might change based on the personal work. Is this true? That's interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if that was true, because again, like the personal work is where you get to show your personality. So if you have amazing personal work, but you kind of maybe weren't good at as good at the other ones, even though everything is important, but if your personal work is amazing, that they might be like, okay, this person needs to get in. Let's like increase the scores from the other things so that they'll. Because I don't know. I'm not sure about that. That's a bit of a conspiracy, but we'll see. Making a piece of art based off of a fairy tale or legend count as drawing an existing character. That's a neat idea. Like taking like a Brothers Grimm story and making new characters for it. You can always do that. There's never like. That's actually a great idea, because that's sort of how Disney came up with their film ideas for most of the 20th century. So, like. Being inspired by an existing story is totally fine. I would caution though, like think of more like archetypal kind of tales, like folklore, and like, you know, like Cinderella or something like that, or like whatever other ones that Disney hasn't done maybe. You could totally do that. There's a lot of great Russian folk tales that I was reading and really interested in, and I'd be like, wow, this is great. I would love to see a character of this. So you can totally do stuff like that, but don't do things. I would really caution away from fan art, like existing IPs of like, especially modern stuff. That's going to get you less points for sure.
Okay, good character design books. Or other good books.
Character design, Okay, it's not here. So Tom Bancroft has a couple of really great character design books. We might have to do a separate video on that. I don't have them ready at my fingertips. I have like a whole list, but Tom Bancroft is a great place to start, and that's where our teachers kind of advise us to start. So he has like a character design crash course or something along those lines. He has great ones. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, any of the art of books show great character design, but not in a lesson by lessons kind of way.
Maybe we'll have to do a stream about that then.
Yeah.
Good idea. Yeah, if you guys have ideas for what you want to know more about, please ask us. Foreground, midground, and background.
Advice for having a good foreground. Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know how to answer that exactly because it depends on what the composition is trying to do. Basically, your goal when you're drawing a background is to make it very clear where people should look, especially if it's a quick scene or something. You don't have a lot of time to register all the beauty of everything. So sometimes the best foreground is like almost invisible. It just is like laying in the not in the background, obviously. I mean, like just kind of being muted, so you're not pulling attention towards the foreground because you're supposed to be looking at the character in the midground. So it really depends what the composition needs to do. But in terms of like good everything in terms of background, I would think of like dynamic backgrounds. So using diagonals, using angles, having interesting terrain that isn't just a flat plane. Even if it's a room and it is flat, have lots of or not like it doesn't need to be a mess, but have things obscuring corners. Because sometimes when people start drawing perspective, you'll see every little corner in every corner of a desk, and it's like look at a room in your life. Everyone do this. Look at a room in your life. You almost never see corners. There's always stuff obscuring it. There's tables, there's chairs, couches, objects. There's always things, but it's hard to layer things like that, and so people tend not to. Whereas you need to do. Often the hardest way is the way that you need to go, unfortunately, in drawing.
Now, about midground, foreground, and background, we've got a concept artist teaching a lesson about composition in a really straightforward way during our summer camp. And that can be joined either in person or online. And then we've got a whole day of dynamic composition where Garth is teaching how to scene dress and design your scenes, put your characters in the scene. And I'm teaching about hierarchy of contrast, like you were saying, how do we look where we want them to, and then we digitally paint it, which makes a really cool piece, like for a artist choice piece, your free choice piece.
Yeah,
so
I mean that's great.
Something you could consider asking us about those composition classes if that's an area you're interested in. What else have we got for questions here?
If you have a Wacom hard to get in without any now, I'm not sure what you're trying to say there. If you have a Wacom, is it hard to get in without any? So I'm guessing you're talking about the whole traditional digital thing. So it really doesn't matter. Even if your entire portfolio is digital, I mean, I probably wouldn't do that just because it tends to not get you the best results. But if it gets you better results than your pencil drawing, then that's the one that you need to do. It doesn't matter about the medium. It's about the quality of the drawing. So talking about medium isn't super... Like, if you love drawing with marker, I guess you could do that. But there's certain mediums that will...
good to have a variety of media to show your diversity. But what's most important is the quality of the drawing, the creativity of the characters, all of that. Now, we missed a question. CalArts, SVA, Ringling for animation.
Oh, I
yes,
answered it already.
Those are top programs. Oh, I missed that.
Well, I just typed it here.
Oh, you typed
basically,
it. Yeah.
that they're all amazing and they're just horribly expensive. So
They are. And we have helped students get accepted into all of those, too.
Yeah.
So if that's what you're interested in, please reach out to us and we can help you with how to get into those schools.
So, can you talk about hands? Yep, they're great. They hold a lot of things. No, so you're talking about the hand drawings, the first two things of the portfolio. So that's although it's the first one and perhaps the most sort of elementary in some ways. Obviously, drawing hands is extremely difficult and requires a lot of understanding of both perspective and how things move in the form. But also, it's a great opportunity to tell a little bit of story because even what that happens between those two hand poses is where you get to kind of fill that area with like, okay, how can I be creative with this and how can I do something that is not everyone's going to do? the hands, they're seeing literally, well, probably thousands of drawings of different students. So you need to constantly ask yourself that question, like, how do you stand out? What, aside from all of this is with assuming that your drawing quality is good. Obviously, if it's not, then that is where your priorities need to go right now. But if it's good, then it's a matter of like, all right, well, there's a whole bunch of good drawers over here. Which ones are going to float to the surface? And those are the ones with the greatest stories.
Oh, we got so
we have
many
a whole
questions.
bunch of questions. Bonus points if you draw this
in the corner. So with drawing hands, Proco has an amazing video about drawing hands. You want to learn about primary structure, secondary structure, tertiary structure. You want to learn about geometric structure and definitely study anatomy. And so let's see. And I love Werner Zimmerman is amazing at teaching about hands. And he is teaching a one-day workshop with us, but Proco I find is good.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we got. Loads here.
Advice for drawing for animating. I'm guessing you're saying.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's the newest sort of thing in the portfolio is that you need to create some animation. The trick is that there's only 48 frames, which is like only 2 seconds, I guess, if it's 24 frames a second, which usually it is. But so I don't know exactly what is it again. It's an object that needs to be moving or something, or
well, they change it every year, right? So you won't know exactly what the animation is until you apply, and then you find out. One year it was a walk cycle. Last year it was an object, and they really wanted to just see that you understand how do things move, right? A simple movement of a simple object, cause and effect a little bit. But I know one student that got in, she said she made sure she put in sort of the classic things of stretch and bounce and, these kinds of
that's a great
principles.
idea.
And so she
Having
made sure
a bit
that
of,
was in it.
Cartooniness to it. You want it to be caricatured from reality enough so that it's worth animating. That's a big sort of more like philosophical question of why animate something. It's like, well, probably because we can't do that in live action, or it brings out a certain character, a certain personality through the animation, so it makes it worth doing. So if you're just going to do like a cabinet falling over, it's like, well, why did you bother animating that? There needs to be some kind of personality there. If the cabinet falls over and it bounces and then the drawers fly out in a very cartoony kind of way, then okay, we've got a little bit of character in that cabinet now. So that's sort of how I would think about that.
And you want to think about cause and effect. That something doesn't just fall over. What it impacts its surroundings too. So where if somebody's moving, they're not stiff. If they're walking, their hair might be bouncing. Their clothes move. All of those things.
Well, there's a lot of great questions. So should you digitally retouch your traditional drawings for the required pieces? That's fine so long as you're not you're not redrawing them or adjusting. I really caution away from that because if they see that it's edited, I don't know exactly how it works, but I assume they put those into a separate pile and that's like if it looks like you've manipulated it. Like, it's one thing to digitally retouch, it's another to photo manipulate, and I wouldn't photo manipulate, but I would increase the levels, like bring the contrast up a little bit. Simple things like that would be fine. Crop it a little bit, clean it up. Even lately I've been using the healing brush tool a little bit to fix marks that have nothing to do with the actual pose and that aren't really causing any, they're just kind of noise, I fix noise a little bit, but that's about it. So it's really just like retouching. Advice for drawing animals. Well, I mean, animal drawing isn't part of the portfolio anymore, but I'm guessing you mean for like your personal work or something. And if so, with anything, I would only submit it if you're really good at it. So if you can get really good at drawing animals and show maybe some animal anatomy, for example, some structure, some of the scapula, the rib cage, hips, things like that. If you can show those a little bit. Then you're okay. Then that makes sense because then you're showing some animal anatomy. That's very good. But if you're just doing it to kind of have it there, I wouldn't do that. I would really think about like what will be the strongest bang for your buck, sort of. So, but there is some great books on drawing animals if you want to do that. But it's generally the same way that you would draw humans, like with a more of a gestural kind of quality to it, not super rendered. That'd be more for illustration, and not getting too lost in things like fur and pattern. It's more structure and form based. So again, like the life drawing, you probably have seen some life drawings of animation, people in animation, and it's not so interested in drawing the contour around the poses. It's interested in drawing the underlying structure. So you need to do that with animals too. That's the biggest thing I would say.
So Werner Zimmerman, who teaches at Seneca, he says if you're going to put animals in your portfolio, draw them from several points of view, study them, and make sure you study the skeletal structure, and have that even in a gestural way in your drawing. So if you start with gesture with animals and then add in that skeleton and add in the muscles, keep the details simple, that should give you a nice yield, and have them in action, and show their personality, right? Okay, what else we got?
I want to take a year off and take an online concept art course before going to Sheridan. Would you recommend this? Have people done this before? Yeah, that's definitely a great idea. Take a whole bunch of online courses if you want to. I mean, there's usually two ways of doing that. So a lot of services are starting to do this, where you can either pay monthly at a heavily reduced rate. It's like anywhere from like $30 to like $120 typically a month, and you just have access to all the videos, which is great if you're self-motivated, and you have like a schedule that allows you to put time towards it. That's definitely like a great option, especially if affordability is an issue. But then like there's mentorships where you basically get one-on-one time with that person. You're going to get a lot more out of that probably, because then you have them looking at your work in particular, and feedback is incredibly valuable. Also, I would say about online courses, and this is why we're starting to offer these online courses, is that you actually end up with more one-on-one time with the teacher than even any college program. Because if you think of even something like Sheridan, there's about 30 students in the class once you get into animation, whereas online you have, there's all different structures for online courses, but a typical way is like ours is basically 1 hour online meetup every week. So even if there's like maybe 5 to 10 students, you still get like 10, 20 minutes, depends how much work everyone has, with the teacher, of them looking at your work, which is probably more than an entire class at college. So that's why a lot of people are offering online classes. So I would definitely recommend that. And there's so many different choices to choose from now. I would say though that if you're if you're beginner, make sure to take beginner courses. If you like jump into the thing that you want to do eventually, like concept art for example, you might be better off taking like a slightly lower, because they're going to be throwing all kinds of stuff at you, like probably Photoshop techniques for example, and you don't really want to go into that too much. You want to get your drawing really solid first. Even if you're really interested in painting, you want to get your drawing solid first. Drawing is the fundamental thing that underlies all of this. So take courses that are going to like improve your drawing, improve your observation, all that kind of thing is where I would start with if you're just a beginner.
So this comes up a lot. People ask me, "Oh, I've been in this fine art program and I think if you want to take a full-time program so you're immersed in the learning, look for a program that really focuses on the fundamental skill of drawing, and make sure there's life drawing, that there's perspective drawing, object drawing, like various types, and make sure the school is good at teaching drawing. Because if you want to get into animation, especially at Sheridan or CalArts, something like that, you got to draw really well, number one. So, art fundamentals at Sheridan could be a good thing to do. Like you take a 1-year certificate that's really focused, and then what I've heard from some students that have been successful, some students say, okay, then they take time off and they do online, and they get one-to-one mentoring from various people that they find really knows about what they're studying. And they said that they actually got more out of it for less money. Like Michelle Salinga did that in the States. So she said she started to get frustrated that she was in a full-time program and she wasn't learning what she needed, and yet she had all this coursework she had to do. And so she said the year she took off was way better. She just did a little bit of online mentoring and she got good at those things, and then she ended up with a 94. And if you're an international student, you need a higher average on your portfolio, which makes it even more competitive. So let's see what else we got.
So would there be a difference in score for light drawing if I did Conte newsprint instead of paper and pencil? It's funny that you asked that, because most people do Conte newsprint, and then they take a picture of it and hand those in. I mean, paper and pencil tends to make people draw it makes your drawing stiff, because you're drawing from your wrist, whereas you want to get your whole arm into it. Again, that's another light drawing tip I would recommend, is like draw with your whole arm, which tends to make you more expressive, less finicky over details. Drawing like super rendered details is not what you want to do in light drawing. So you want to get the whole mass, the gestures that include each independent mass and how they work together.
Yeah, what I've heard from successful students that have been accepted, they say first start by taking a figure drawing class, 1 or 2 of them. Maybe take some workshops once you've been working for a while, but they say go to open life drawing like twice a week if you can. Like, it's so important to draw live, and if you can't get to a course or an open life drawing, make one. Get some friends together. Model for each other if you have to. Find a way to draw from life and study anatomy. Okay,
so I think what this person is asking is what's it like to pay back a 4-year program? That really depends where you do it. That's like, again, the States is way more. Well, I had a lot of parental support, to be honest. Like I was paying. I worked all the summers, and then that went towards the school. But then I also had parental support, so that definitely helped. But other people get out OSAP. They get out a loan, and then you have an interest-free loan, which is the best loan you're going to get in your lifetime, probably, for a certain number of years. But you can investigate that, and it's different, I think, for international students too. So I'm not exactly sure, but alternatively, if you're asking the question of like, this almost seems like a pay question. Like, can you pay back your school? That whole question of like, will you make enough in the field to be able to pay back the program? And everyone that I know has been able to do that. So
awesome. Garth is working in his field. Our concept artist works full time. Now, if you want more questions about that, about how to get work in your field, we've got Mike L. Murphy, the animator of Gollum and Iron Giant and Iron Man and Harry Potter and all this stuff. He's doing a live webinar with me on Sunday afternoon at 1. If you want to know about that, message me somehow so that we can invite you to that, and that would help answer some of those questions. But yeah, it seems like, you're working. Yeah. And so you say a lot of the grads are working in
I guess we don't always talk about that explicitly, but everyone that I know that's working in animation is working in animation, and as long as you're working, you're okay.
You're okay. Good.
To some degree.
What else do we have for questions?
All right. So how would you go about getting mentoring? How should I ask? How should I go about it? Well, let's start with us. As we offer mentoring of different kinds, whether it's like one-on-one or an 8-week class. We're starting to offer a series of 8-week classes. One of them in the fall is going to be animation fundamentals. So it's going to be talking about all this animation portfolio stuff as it is. And then there's also going to be illustration fundamentals. There's a digital painting course that we offer there, and then there's the character design specific course called World Building and Character Design. And later on, we're planning to do a world building and background design too. So that's sort of in the works. But aside from us, there's a lot of there's schoolism there. Everything. I find that we try and get 5 to 10 people in the class so that it can be affordable for everyone. A lot of one-on-one mentoring with teachers online can get very, very expensive. About as much or more than college, like a single course of college. So schoolism is like $900. I'm not sure, don't quote me on this, but it's like $900 US dollars. So for Canadians, it's even worse. But that's quite a lot. So it's probably worth it, and if you have the money, then that's great. But a lot of people don't. So if you could do cheaper online mentoring, then that's sort of the bridge that we're trying to make here with ours.
Yeah.
But you might be able to contact an artist individually and ask them and say, look, I want to learn from you. Could we work out some kind of system,
Yeah,
it's worth trying?
I know a really successful illustrator, and he used to just reach out to people online, show them he liked their work, just build relationships. And there's a lot of artists that like to mentor people, so you can always just show them you're a fan and see who's open to providing you some guidance.
I'm going to answer this one because it's like 2 seconds.
Okay.
Can you get into the animation industry without a degree? Definitely no one cares about a degree. The only thing that a degree does is it gets you into different countries easier. That's what I've heard, is that no one in the industry asks you for a degree. They ask you for a good portfolio. So if you can give that, then the degree doesn't matter. But a degree does help you get a visa in another country.
Okay. Thoughts on 3D Sense Media, of course.
I'm guessing you mean like 3D media, like 3D modeling and things like that. If you're not asking that, then maybe follow that up with a more clear question. But if that's what you're saying, like, you could definitely submit some 3D stuff in your portfolio. Again, it's kind of a bit of a cart before the horse situation, because drawing is the most important. They don't really care if you're a good 3D. I mean, if you could 3D model amazingly, then that's really great. Then put that in for sure. But most people don't. They're not amazing at 3D sculpting without also being at least a half decent artist. So the artistry is definitely first.
3D Sense is a course.
Oh.
I don't know.
I don't know about this. I'm just learning about this as we speak.
Now?
We'll get back to that. So tips for getting nice lines. So if you mean like in life drawing, there's a lot you can do with how you hold the conte, turning it on its side. And in life drawing, you want a variety of lines too. You don't want to have a static line. So like you want some dark lines, some light lines, some thick lines, and some thin lines. And you can vary all of those together. So for example, if it's like a leg that is taking most of the weight, you might darken the lines of that leg to show that that's holding the weight of the pose. Mm-hmm. Whereas if like one arm is just kind of dainty like this, you might draw that a little bit lighter, a little bit more of a sweeping stroke. Yeah. But really that's hard to demonstrate without literally showing you. It's kind of you gotta hold the conte in particular ways. Yeah. But that's another reason why I would recommend conte sticks over pencils.
Yeah, you know what? This is an exciting thing. Mark Thurman, who teaches life drawing at Sheridan Animation, and actually he was one of your teachers, right, Garth?
Yeah.
He still teaches there. He's amazing. And he's agreed to do a 1-day workshop with us this summer, and that's one of the things on his list that he wants to teach is how to control the conte. And it's one of the things we teach with our perspective and our character design that if you want to create something in the foreground coming forward, you might have a thicker line, and the background might be thinner or grayer or softer. And then the same thing you're saying, that I want to create weight and, stress, and I also want to guide the eye. Those are all things that we teach in our various types of workshops. But yeah, how you hold the thing and what tool you're using matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you keep on model for storyboard when Sheridan gives one view of a bad drawn cloud? Isn't there 2 views? It's 2 characters. Yeah. I mean, you gotta. I mean, the good thing is like the form of the clown is so simple that it's like the torso is like 2 circles, one larger at the belly and one smaller at the top, and then a connecting. And so it's just like. Even if you rotate that around, it doesn't really matter because it's based on these elemental, very simple. It's not like you're drawing like a fully 3-dimensional like T-Rex or something that has all these different details. It's like it's not. You can see in the drawing, even though it's like an old school kind of drawing style, you can see a lot of stuff about what their hands look like, how their feet looks. But keeping on model is tough. It's a difficult thing. You need to constantly look at your character, look at the relationships, the space between different elements, the eyes and the nose, the neck and the head. All those things, you need to constantly look at them and figure out if there's anything wrong, because being on model is very important.
Sketchbook, should you put that in as your personal artwork? I know a lot of students choose
3D
to do
Sense
that.
looks pretty cool. It looks pretty good to me. I mean, it looks very 3D focused. That's going to be my initial thought, is that, there's concept design and illustration. Perhaps. It looks very game focused and visual effects focused. Yeah, I mean, again, you want to focus on drawing. So if the illustration pathway in that program is going to get you to draw better, then great. But really contact them. Ask them lots of questions about it. You should be able to do that. So ask them if you're going to like learn to draw. How basic is it? Is it for your skill level? You should really know all these things before going into any kind of online course. But yeah, it looks pretty solid. It's just maybe a little too 3D heavy in some of those. So personal sketchbook. Definitely, yeah. So the things that you should draw in your sketchbook is pretty much an extension of the things that they're asking for you already. So life drawing anatomy, one thing that a lot of people draw is just characters from life. So like clothed characters like around the world, like go to a cafe, draw people, draw the whole cafe, draw the room, draw like a variety of things, but all sort of circling the portfolio. If you think of all the things that the portfolio is about, things like that, or lots of characters, just sketches of characters, sketches of show your process and how you got to a certain background, like we were talking about earlier. That's a great idea. A little comic strips, all that kind of stuff is great. Gags, like complete. The nice thing about gag strips is that it's like complete little stories in like 3 or 4 frames. Most students don't do that because it's sort of an older school version of comics, but they're so great. If you want to see really great ones, he's one of the first like early comics. But Winsor McKay has amazing little like short gag strips, so look up that name. There's just draw anything in your sketchbook. What I wouldn't draw, maybe it's better to say this, is like a lot of like anime. We get a lot of that, of students that love drawing anime. The problem with anime is it's such a saturated style. There's so much of it already, and there's so many, and some of it is less concerned about three-dimensionality and form, like three-dimensional form, whereas a lot of the Disney characters, the only reason the Disney style sort of gets a bit of a preference is just because you can rotate those characters very easily and see what they would look like from every different view. So you could easily send a Disney character design that's a 2D character off to a 3D modeler, and they could model that character, whereas anime relies on the fact that it's 2D, and so sometimes you don't see form. Obviously things like Studio Ghibli are a bit of a different example, because they were drawing actually quite realistic characters, but just with slight anime tinges to them. So I hope that makes sense. But not a lot of anime. Not like, don't include pages with like your name signed 100 different times like everyone does in high school. Things like that would be probably not a good idea. Just like all drawing focused. Could you please post when that one day class?
I will.
Oh yeah. Okay. I think we're at the end of the questions.
We're at the end. Is there any burning questions you have to ask before we say
3
goodbye
minutes
for
left.
now? Type it now, and I'm going to rate when Mark Thurman is teaching. Sunday. I guess we're not seeing any more questions. Any advice that you have, since we seem to be done with questions?
Yeah, I feel like the life drawing question I could kind of talk about for ages, and also it's what students struggle with the most. And it's also one of the most difficult things to learn online, so I guess I'll touch on that more. But yeah, life drawing is often the weakest area of a lot of students, along with the storyboard, but it's sort of, the storyboard's a bit of an extension of a good knowledge of life drawing. So yeah, like the pose, to have a dramatic poses, storytelling poses, with a variety of line quality, that aren't kind of carved into the paper. A lot of people draw way too hard when they're doing life drawing. So things like that are not the best thing. You want to have like a little bit lighter strokes. Yeah, the Force drawing series. I'm not sure. Like the Force books are really great. He's an animator, I'm pretty sure, so that makes sense that he would have good life drawing advice. Yeah, he caricatures a lot. I wouldn't caricature in your life drawings. I would make it fairly realistic. That's one of the few things that they really want to do realistically. I guess we should talk about our camp a bit and our online courses coming up, and that might be good to go. I think we have most of the...
Can you just screen share with this or not?
Sorry?
Oh, we're on our webcam. Did we end up going with webcam instead of your program? Or
No.
can we screen share? Because you could go to our YouTube channel. Our website if you want. If you can screen share this.
Yeah, that's tricky. I'm not trying to add in a different window now that we've already set it up. Well, it's just boardprep.com.
Yeah, I'll write that.
Yeah. That's all of our stuff. You can see it on there.
And then look for the animation illustration.
Glenn Vilppu's great. Someone's asking about Glenn Vilppu. Andrew Loomis is another name I would throw out there. Glenn Vilppu and Andrew Loomis are like sort of in line with each other, I would say. So Glenn Vilppu has I think it's called the Art Masters Academy or Old Masters or something. And that site that's another one of those sites that you can pay like a certain amount per month and get unlimited content. So that's obviously really great if you're self-disciplined. If not, you need a one-on-one mentorship. So that's how I go about that. Great. So everyone's got all of our information. Is there anything? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Garth and I work together a lot. And Werner Zimmerman also works with us. We often do small workshops with Werner, who's an amazing figure drawing instructor, taught at Sheridan. He's at Seneca now. If you ever see some of his master's life drawing programs that he does himself in his studio, they're amazing. He does this fun one you did once on drawing animal skeletons and then making them into characters. Into
creatures, like into custom animals, I guess.
It's cool.
We have one more question here.
I teach the basic fundamentals, like how to draw accurately, and especially if you're in a more beginner level, how to get your drawing skills up quickly. That's what I focus on, and the perspective, object drawing, that kind of thing. And obviously Garth is the character designer, storyboarder, all of that. We also have a concept artist that helps us, and then he and Garth kind of collaborate on the digital painting. And Werner Zimmerman is our the person that helps us with figure drawing, although we all sort of help with figure drawing.
Yeah.
I tends to be the fundamentals teacher, get your basic skills up, and then Garth works at that higher level with you guys to help you with your characters and your life drawing. I also do a lot of work with the hands, hand drawing, that kind of thing.
So there's just one more sort of comment about Sheridan doesn't have open life drawing unless you're part-time. You can draw over the summer. I mean, I don't know how that works. Somebody said it was $30 a day, which is like, that's actually kind of steep.
Yeah.
If anyone's local to Guelph, I run a life drawing class every Tuesday night from 7 to 10 for $18. What is it last?
$18, right?
Yeah.
$18.
Yeah. So that's 3 hours for 18. So that's about $6
much more
an hour.
affordable.
But I mean, if you have local options, that's great. There is some online options, but it obviously doesn't. It's not the same.
It's okay to learn.
It's worth practicing, but
it's okay to learn, but it's not going to be what you need. So a lot of small art schools and art supply shops have open life drawing, and you can also get together and make one. I used to live in a smaller town where we didn't have stuff like that. We made a group for ourselves. It's kind of like what you and your dad started.
Yeah. And
we basically, everybody just comes, it's drop in, you pay your $18 and it just pays for the model.
Yeah.
So.
I'm just curious, if everyone could post where they're coming from or how they found out about us, that would be great.
So interesting
I'm
to
very
see.
curious to hear.
There was a question about Cal Arts and things like that. Oh, they're all gone now.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So, good. So what do we do now? We just stop?
I think we stop recording on this one. Stop stream.